My name is Brooklyn Mitchell. At 34, I run a small handmade jewelry business in Seattle. Nothing extraordinary about that, right? Just another millennial trying to make it in an overpriced city with a cute little hobby business. That's what my family called it. Anyway, I always believed family was my backbone. The people who would stand by me no matter what. The ones who'd celebrate my victories and help me through my failures. I believed that until I didn't. Until the day my sister humiliated me in front of everyone, and what happened next turned everything upside down. I'll never forget standing in the grand ballroom of the Belmont Plaza, surrounded by my entire family, feeling their sneers, until my sister's son, the pilot, stepped out of nowhere and saluted me. They thought I was the family failure. They had no idea I was the one holding all the cards. What I did next made sure they'd never underestimate me again. Growing up in the Mitchell family meant understanding your place in the hierarchy. My parents, Linda and Robert Mitchell, worked steady jobs. Dad as an accountant, and Mom as a high school English teacher. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. We lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in a decent neighborhood outside Seattle. My childhood bedroom had pale blue walls and a window seat where I'd spend hours creating things with my hands. From an early age, I showed an aptitude for design and craftsmanship. While other kids were playing video games, I was making intricate friendship bracelets and beaded necklaces that looked better than the stuff in local boutiques. Mom would occasionally display my creations at teacher craft fairs, where they'd sell out within hours. "You have a gift, Brooklyn," she'd tell me, her eyes warm with pride. That was before Olivia became the family star. My sister, Olivia, is 4 years younger than me, which makes her 30 now. Where I was quiet and thoughtful, Olivia was loud and demanding. Where I was creative and methodical, Olivia was charismatic and spontaneous. As children, this balance worked well. I'd create elaborate dollhouses, and she'd create stories about the dolls who lived in them. We were different but complementary. That changed when Olivia hit her teens and discovered she was pretty, really pretty. The kind of pretty that made her Instagram famous before Instagram fame was even a career path. The kind of pretty that got her crowned homecoming queen and prom queen in the same year. The kind of pretty that made my parents start treating her like their golden ticket. Olivia could be a model, Mom would whisper to her friends at church. Or an actress. She's got that special something. Meanwhile, I was the reliable daughter, the one with solid grades and practical plans. I went to Washington State University and majored in business with a minor in fine arts. I had a 5-year plan and followed it to the letter. After graduation, I worked for a local jeweler for 3 years before starting my own business, Coastal Creations, LLC. I specialized in handcrafted jewelry inspired by the Pacific Northwest, delicate silver salmon leaping through jade waves, earrings that mimicked the cascading waters of Snoqualmie Falls, necklaces featuring tiny hand-carved totems. My parents attended my business launch, a small affair at a local gallery, but left early because Olivia had a callback for a commercial. The commercial she didn't get, one of many she didn't get. See, Olivia's problem was that while she was undeniably beautiful, she wasn't exceptional. In Seattle, she turned heads. In Los Angeles, where she moved after dropping out of community college, she was just another pretty face. But my parents never stopped believing she was destined for stardom. They funded apartment after apartment, headshot after headshot, acting class after acting class. "It's an investment," Dad would explain while reviewing their dwindling retirement accounts. "When she makes it big, it'll all be worth it." When Olivia returned to Seattle after 3 fruitless years in LA, she didn't come back defeated. Instead, she reinvented herself as a social media influencer, posting photos of herself in scenic locations around the Pacific Northwest, reviewing local restaurants, and promoting various products. She wasn't particularly successful at this either, hovering around 50,000 followers, enough to get some free products, but not enough to make a living. That's when she met Mark Donovan, an investment banker with family money and connections. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Mark was handsome in that generic way that investment bankers often are. Good haircut, expensive watch, collar just starched enough. He treated Olivia like a prize and me like an inconvenience. "So you make jewelry?" he asked at our first meeting, his tone suggesting I might as well have said I professionally picked my nose for a living. "I own a jewelry design company," I corrected. "Cute," he replied, before turning to discuss property values with my father. I might have been able to ignore their dismissal of my career if it weren't so persistent. At every family gathering, my business was referred to as my little hobby or my arts and crafts project. Meanwhile, Olivia's Instagram account, which generated barely enough income to cover her phone bill, was discussed as though she were running a Fortune 500 company. "Olivia just got approached by that athleisure brand," Mom would announce proudly. "They're sending her free leggings to post about, isn't that amazing?" "Brooklyn, when are you going to get a real job?" Dad would ask in the same conversation. "You know, Robert at the golf club is always looking for administrative assistants." The pattern was exhausting but manageable until December 2018. We were gathered around the dining table for Christmas dinner, turkey with all the trimmings, Mom's special cranberry sauce that nobody actually liked, but everyone pretended to, and enough tension to snap a power line. Olivia had just announced her engagement to Mark, and the family was in full celebration mode. Champagne flowed freely, and everyone took turns admiring her massive diamond ring. "So, Brooklyn," Olivia said, turning to me with that smile that never reached her eyes. "Any special men in your life? Or are you still married to those little trinkets you make?" "My business keeps me busy," I replied, cutting my turkey with more force than necessary. "And I'm seeing someone. It's new, but it's going well." This was a lie. There was no one. My last relationship had ended 6 months prior when Eric, my boyfriend of 2 years, accepted a job in Chicago. We'd tried long distance for 3 months before admitting defeat, but I couldn't bear another Christmas of pitying looks. "Oh, honey," Olivia laughed, exchanging glances with Mark. "You know you can tell us the truth. We're family." "I am telling the truth," I insisted, feeling heat creep up my neck. "It's just that," Olivia paused, taking a deliberate sip of champagne. "Mark's friend James saw you at Starbucks the other day. You were alone, working on your laptop, on a Friday night." "So?" I challenged, though I knew exactly where she was going with this. "So, he felt bad for you, sitting there all alone while everyone else was out having fun. He asked if you were the family's embarrassment." The table fell silent. Even the clink of silverware stopped. "Olivia," my mother admonished weakly, "that's not nice." "What?" Olivia feigned innocence. "I'm just repeating what he said. I defended you, Brooke. I told him you weren't an embarrassment, just different." I looked around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to stand up for me. My father studied his plate. My mother nervously rearranged her napkin. Mark smirked into his wineglass. "Well," I said finally, standing up and tossing my napkin onto my half-eaten dinner, "this family embarrassment has a business to run. Merry Christmas, everyone." I drove home in tears that night, promising myself I'd take a break from family gatherings. A promise I broke just months later when Olivia called, crying, saying she needed my help. That was June 2020, when I made the catastrophic mistake of loaning Olivia $15,000 for what she called a business venture. She'd discovered a unique opportunity to invest in a friend's startup, a social media platform specifically for influencers to connect with brands. "It's going to revolutionize the industry," she insisted, sitting in my small office above my jewelry studio. "The returns are guaranteed. I just need seed money." And I'd ask Mark, but he's so busy with his own investments right now, and I want to show him I can do this myself. Against my better judgment, and the explicit advice of my accountant, I wrote her a check. The platform never materialized. The friend took the money and disappeared to Bali. And Olivia? She was too devastated to pay me back. "I'm a victim too. Brooklyn," she sobbed when I asked about repayment 3 months later. "How can you be so heartless? I lost everything." "You lost my money," I corrected her. "Money I worked hard for." "It's always about money with you," Isn't it? She snapped, her tears vanishing as quickly as they'd appeared. Some of us care about relationships more than dollars and cents. That particular guilt trip cost me not only $15,000, but also another 6 months of awkward family dinners where I was painted as the mercenary villain who cared more about money than her sister's feelings. By March 2022, when we gathered to celebrate Mom's 60th birthday, the dynamics were set in stone. Olivia and Mark were the golden couple. I was the spinster sister with the cute hobby who couldn't keep a man. The fact that my business had grown considerably, I now employed 3 artisans and had a waiting list for custom pieces, was irrelevant to the family narrative. The birthday party was held at an upscale restaurant with a private room overlooking Lake Washington. 40 relatives attended, including cousins I hadn't seen in years. I'd spent weeks creating a special gift for my mother. A sterling silver locket featuring a hand-painted miniature portrait of her as a young woman. Based on her favorite photograph. The detail work had required a magnifying glass and specialized tools. I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. for a week straight to finish it. When Mom opened it, her eyes widened with genuine delight. "Brooklyn, this is exquisite," she breathed, showing it to my aunt. "Look at the detail. It's just like my photograph." For a moment, I felt seen, appreciated. Then Olivia's voice cut through the warmth. "That's so sweet, Brooke, making Mom a little craft project like you did in elementary school," she said loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "Mark and I got her something too." She handed Mom a small envelope. Inside was a confirmation for a 2-week Mediterranean cruise for our parents, a gift that probably cost Mark the equivalent of my monthly rent, but represented perhaps an hour of his salary. "Oh my goodness," Mom exclaimed, immediately setting my locket aside. "Robert, look at this! Greece, Italy, Spain!" The room erupted in appreciative murmurs. I sat quietly, watching as my heartfelt creation was literally pushed aside for a flashier, more expensive gift. Later, as servers cleared dessert plates, Olivia cornered me by the restrooms. "Your gift was cute," she said, reapplying her lipstick in the mirror. "It's nice that you still pursue your pointless hobbies. Not everyone needs to achieve real success." I stared at her reflection, searching for any trace of the sister I'd once built dollhouses with. "Why do you do this, Olivia? Why do you need to tear me down to feel good about yourself?" She snapped her lipstick closed and turned to face me. "You know your problem, Brooklyn? You think you're special because you make things with your hands. But the truth is, you'll never be more than the little sister who can't keep up. It's sad. Really." As she brushed past me, I caught her arm. "I'm running a successful business. I'm doing what I love. How is that not keeping up?" Olivia laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed against the bathroom tiles. "You call that little operation successful? Please, Mark makes more in his annual bonus than you do all year. And what do you have to show for your life? No husband, no children, just a bunch of shiny trinkets no one really needs." Her words stung because they targeted my deepest insecurities. At 31, I was painfully aware of my single status in a family that valued traditional markers of success. My sister had always known exactly where to plant her verbal daggers. The real twist in our family saga came when Olivia and Mark announced they were expecting a baby. My parents were ecstatic at the prospect of becoming grandparents. The pregnancy dominated every conversation, every family gathering, every holiday. When Jake was born, a beautiful, brown-eyed boy with a shock of dark hair, I fell in love instantly. Whatever resentment I harbored toward my sister couldn't extend to this innocent child. I threw myself into being the best aunt possible, showing up with thoughtful gifts, offering to babysit whenever needed, creating special keepsake jewelry to mark his milestones. To my surprise, Jake and I developed a genuine bond. He was a serious, thoughtful child who seemed to recognize something kindred in my quieter nature. By the time he was 5, he was spending weekends with me, sitting patiently in my studio, learning to string simple bead patterns while I worked on more complex pieces. "You have special hands, Aunt Brooklyn," he told me once, studying my fingers as I twisted fine silver wire. "They make beautiful things." As Jake grew, so did my business. I expanded my product line, hired more staff, and secured contracts with several high-end boutiques. I moved from my tiny apartment above the studio to a modest but stylish condo with a dedicated workspace. I dated occasionally but never found anyone who felt right. Or perhaps I'd built such high walls that no one could scale them. Jake entered his teen years with a passion for aviation. At 15, he announced his intention to become a pilot, preferably in the Air Force. Olivia and Mark were dismissive. "That's a nice dream, honey," Olivia told him. "But you know Daddy's firm has a place for you after college." Jake would call me after these conversations, frustrated and seeking an ally. "They don't listen to me, Aunt Brooklyn. They think they know what's best, but they don't know me at all." I recognize the feeling all too well. Keep showing them who you are, Jake. Eventually, they'll have to see you. When Jake turned 18, he applied to the Air Force Academy without telling his parents. He listed me as his primary reference. When the acceptance letter came, he showed up at my door, his face a mixture of terror and elation. "I did it," he whispered, holding out the letter. "But they're going to kill me." "They'll adjust," I assured him, though I wasn't entirely convinced. "This is your life, Jake. You get to choose." The fallout was nuclear. Olivia called me, screaming that I'd encouraged her son to throw away his future. Mark threatened to cut off Jake's college fund. My parents called to express their disappointment in my interference. But Jake stood firm, with me quietly supporting him from the sidelines. He enrolled in the academy and excelled, his natural discipline and intelligence making him a standout cadet. He began pilot training and sent me excited messages about his first solo flights. Meanwhile, at home, his name was rarely mentioned without an accompanying sigh. It was against this backdrop that the final straw incident occurred, the moment that would ultimately change everything. August 14th, 2023. Olivia and Mark's 15th anniversary party at the Willowbrook Estate in Denver. Coincidentally close enough to Colorado Springs that Jake could attend. The venue was absurdly opulent, a sprawling mansion with manicured gardens and a ballroom that could comfortably fit the 150 guests Olivia had invited to witness her marital bliss. I flew in from Seattle, wearing a simple but elegant blue dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. I'd even splurged on professional hair and makeup, determined not to give Olivia any ammunition about my appearance. I brought an anniversary gift, a pair of custom silver champagne flutes I'd designed and crafted myself, featuring an intricate pattern that incorporated elements from their wedding invitations. The evening began pleasantly enough. I chatted with distant relatives, complimented the elaborate floral arrangements, and managed to avoid any direct interaction with Mark, who still treated me with barely disguised disdain. Jake found me by the appetizer table, resplendent in his cadet uniform. "Aunt Brooklyn," he grinned, enveloping me in a hug. "You look amazing." "Not so bad yourself, flyboy," I teased, straightening his already perfect tie. "How's the training going?" His eyes lit up as he told me about his progress, the challenges, the exhilaration of flying. I noticed Olivia watching us from across the room, her expression unreadable. Dinner was served, and I found myself seated at a table far from the main party, with elderly relatives who could barely hear my attempts at conversation. After the meal, Mark stood to make a toast to his beautiful wife, their perfect life, their successful journey together, standard anniversary fare, until Olivia took the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she began, her voice carrying that practiced warmth she'd perfected for her social media videos. 15 years with this amazing man has been a dream come true. We've built such a wonderful life together, a life of purpose and meaning. Her gaze found me in the crowd, and something in her expression made my stomach tighten. "You know, not everyone finds their path so clearly," she continued. "Some people drift through life, never quite finding their place, never quite measuring up." The room grew quiet as guests sensed the shift in tone. "My sister, Brooklyn, for instance," she said, gesturing toward me with her champagne glass. "Always the creative one, always marching to her own drummer, still making her little jewelry pieces after all these years." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. I felt my cheeks burn but kept my expression neutral. What most of you don't know is how much our family has supported Brooklyn's alternative lifestyle choices, how we've propped her up financially, emotionally, how she's been leeching off family goodwill for years. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a blatant lie. If anything, the financial support had flowed in the opposite direction, with my $15,000 loan being just one example. In fact, Olivia continued, her smile turning cruel, even our grandmother's final gift to the family ended up supporting something worthwhile. The $25,000 inheritance that was supposed to go to Brooklyn has been redirected to help fund Jake's pilot training. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. I felt as though I'd been doused in ice water. My grandmother had left me that money specifically to expand my business. She'd been one of the few family members who truly believed in my work. I'd been waiting for the estate to clear probate, planning to use the funds to open a second location. From across the room, I saw my cousin Emma, the family lawyer handling Grandma's estate, shift uncomfortably in her seat. Her eyes met mine briefly before she looked away, confirming what I'd just heard. "So here's to family," Olivia concluded, raising her glass higher, "to supporting each other's real dreams and ambitions, to making sacrifices for what truly matters." The crowd applauded uncertainly, many guests glancing my way with a mixture of curiosity and pity. I remained frozen in my seat, unable to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Not only had Olivia humiliated me in front of everyone we knew, but she'd also revealed that my inheritance, my grandmother's final vote of confidence in me, had been stolen. I looked for Jake, but he had disappeared. My parents sat at the head table, neither meeting my gaze. Mark wore a satisfied smirk. I don't remember leaving my seat or walking through the crowd. I don't remember retrieving my purse or saying goodbye to anyone. The next clear memory I have is sitting alone in my rental car, hands trembling on the steering wheel of the 2017 Subaru Outback, tears streaming down my face. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Please don't leave yet. Meet me by the garden fountain in 10 minutes. I considered ignoring the message and driving straight to the airport, but I couldn't leave Jake thinking I blamed him. I waited 20 minutes, composing myself as best I could, then made my way to the garden fountain, a massive stone structure featuring water-spouting cherubs that matched Olivia's taste for the ostentatious. Jake was waiting, still in his uniform but looking far less composed than he had earlier. His face was tight with anger. "I had no idea they took your inheritance for my training," he said without preamble. "I thought Dad was paying for everything. This is wrong. Aunt Brooklyn." "It's not your fault," I assured him, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "I'm going to confront them," he declared, squaring his shoulders. "Right now, in front of everyone." I caught his arm. "No, Jake. That won't solve anything. It will just make things worse for you." "But they can't treat you like this. They've always treated you like this, and it's not fair. You're the only one who ever supported my dreams. You're the only one who sees me as me, not as some extension of their ambitions." His loyalty warmed me, a tiny ember in the cold ashes of the evening. "I appreciate that more than you know, but this is between your mother and me. It's been building for years." "What are you going to do?" he asked, his young face solemn in the fountain's shifting light. I took a deep breath, feeling something crystallize within me, a resolution that had been forming for longer than I realized. "I'm going to take back my power. Jake, I don't know exactly how yet, but I'm done being their doormat." We hugged goodbye, and I promised to stay in touch. As I drove back to my hotel, my mind was already working, processing, planning. By the time I reached my room, the tears had dried, replaced by a cold, clear determination. The next morning, I changed my flight and returned to Seattle a day early. Instead of going home, I went straight to my studio and buried myself in work, channeling my hurt and anger into creating the most intricate pieces I'd ever designed. I worked for 3 days straight, sleeping on the small couch in my office, ordering takeout, speaking to no one. On the 4th day, I called my accountant. "Rita," I said when she answered, "I need a complete valuation of Coastal Creations. Everything: assets, intellectual property, future projections, the works." "Any particular reason?" she asked cautiously. "Just taking stock," I replied, the double meaning not lost on me. "I need to know exactly where I stand." While Rita worked on the numbers, I began gathering evidence. I combed through years of text messages between Olivia and me, finding the ones where she had mockingly dismissed my work while simultaneously asking for loans and favors. I located bank records showing the $15,000 transfer to her account. I found credit card statements from a card I'd foolishly allowed her to use as an authorized user for emergencies only. Statements showing thousands in charges at high-end boutiques and spas. I contacted my grandmother's estate attorney directly, bypassing Cousin Emma, and requested copies of the will and any amendments. The will clearly stated that $25,000 was to be left to me, Brooklyn Mitchell, to further her artistic endeavors, which brought me such joy in my final years. There were no amendments. The money had been diverted without legal basis. When Rita's report came back, even I was surprised. Coastal Creations LLC had grown more than I realized. Between the physical assets, the intellectual property, including patents on a jewelry clasp design I'd developed, and projected earnings based on current growth, my net worth stood at approximately $1.8 million. Additionally, I'd made some shrewd investments over the years. I was a silent partner in 3 Seattle area restaurants that had done remarkably well: the Blue Oak Bistro, Tuscany Gardens, and the Harbor View. I held modest but profitable stock options from my previous employment at Evergreen Financial Services, and I'd squirreled away a healthy emergency fund that had grown steadily through conservative investments. I was, by any reasonable standard, successful, yet my family still saw me as the failure, the charity case, the one who couldn't keep up. That was about to change. On September 10th, 2023, I met with Jonathan Whitfield of the Whitfield Legal Group. I laid out everything: the years of emotional abuse, the financial exploitation, the theft of my inheritance. "What exactly are you looking for here, Ms. Mitchell?" he asked, after reviewing my documents. "Do you want to sue your sister, your parents, the estate?" I considered the question carefully. "I want 3 things, Mr. Whitfield. First, I want my inheritance restored, the full $25,000 plus interest. Second, I want repayment of all unauthorized credit card charges and unpaid loans. And third—" I paused, the words sticking in my throat. This was the part that felt petty, vindictive, but also necessary. "Third, I want my family to know exactly who I am and what I've accomplished. I want them to understand what they've been dismissing all these years." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, studying me. "The first 2 are straightforward legal matters. The third is more personal." "Can you help me with all 3? He nodded slowly. "We can draft demand letters for the financial aspects. As for the third, that's more about timing and presentation than legal strategy, but I might have some thoughts on that as well." Over the following weeks, Jonathan and I developed a plan. The legal aspects were set in motion with formal letters to Olivia, Mark, my parents, and cousin Emma, outlining the financial claims and demanding repayment. Predictably, these were met with shocked denials, counter-accusations, and attempts to paint me as the unreasonable one. "Your sister is going through a very difficult time," my mother said during a tense phone call. "Mark's firm is restructuring, and they're under a lot of financial pressure. How could you add to their burden like this?" "By asking for my own money back," I countered. "Money that Grandma specifically left to me? Money that Olivia announced, in front of 150 people, had been redirected?" "You're twisting things," Mom insisted. "It was a family decision to help Jake pursue his dreams." "A family decision that conveniently excluded the family member whose money was being taken? That's not a decision, Mom. That's theft." The conversation ended with my mother in tears and me more determined than ever to see this through. The personal aspect of my plan took shape around an upcoming event. Jake's pilot graduation ceremony on October 20th, 2023, at the Belmont Plaza in Chicago. I knew the entire family would be there. It was too significant a milestone to miss, even for relatives who had been lukewarm about Jake's career choice. It would be the perfect stage for what I had in mind. I arranged for a suite at the Belmont 2 days before the ceremony. I commissioned a tailored designer dress worth $3,500, an extravagance I'd never have considered before, but now felt symbolically important. I created a custom clutch from my own collection, featuring a subtle design of ascending aircraft that would serve as my private nod to Jake. Most importantly, I prepared a presentation. Using the evidence I'd gathered, I created a video montage that juxtaposed Olivia's public claims about me with private text messages showing the reality. I included financial documents with key sections highlighted, screenshots of social media posts where she'd mocked my work while wearing jewelry I'd given her, and a section about grandmother's will with the relevant passage enlarged. Throughout this preparation, Jake remained my silent ally, providing information about the ceremony schedule and family seating arrangements. He didn't know the details of what I planned. I felt it was better to give him plausible deniability, but he knew I intended to stand up for myself at last. "Whatever you're planning, Aunt Brooklyn," he told me during one of our calls, "I've got your back." By the time October 20th arrived, everything was in place. I spent the morning at the hotel spa, indulging in treatments I'd normally consider frivolous. I had my hair and makeup done professionally, aiming for an effect that was polished but not overdone. I wanted to look like myself, just the best version possible. When I slipped into the designer dress, a midnight blue sheath that fit as though it had been poured onto my body, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror, not because of the external trappings, but because of the confidence in her eyes. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I felt complete certainty about my path forward. The ceremony was held in the Crystal Ballroom at the Belmont Plaza, an ornate space with soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic light across the gathered crowd. More than 200 people filled the room: family members, friends, military personnel, and several of Olivia's influencer contacts who were live streaming the event for their followers. I arrived deliberately late, after most guests were seated. As I walked down the center aisle to my assigned seat in the family section, I felt eyes tracking my progress. My mother's mouth fell open slightly as she took in my appearance. My father straightened in his chair, blinking rapidly as though trying to reconcile the woman approaching with the daughter he thought he knew. Mark frowned, his expression darkening as he whispered something to Olivia. And Olivia, her face underwent a fascinating transformation. Initial confusion gave way to recognition, which quickly morphed into a calculating assessment, followed by a dismissive smirk. Even now, she couldn't help underestimating me. I took my seat without acknowledging any of them, focusing my attention on the stage where Jake and his fellow graduates would soon appear. The ceremony began with speeches from military officials, followed by a video presentation about the rigorous training program the cadets had completed. Then, one by one, the graduates were called to receive their wings. "Cadet Jake Donovan," announced the commanding officer. Jake strode onto the stage in his dress uniform, his posture perfect, his face solemn. As his wings were pinned to his chest, I felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Whatever else had happened, whatever was about to happen, this moment was about Jake and his achievement. After the formal ceremony concluded, there was a reception in an adjoining ballroom. This was where the family celebrations would take place, and where I had arranged for my presentation to be displayed. A large projector screen had been set up at one end of the room, ostensibly for showing family photos of the graduates. I positioned myself near the screen, waiting for the right moment. Olivia was holding court near the center of the room, surrounded by her social media friends, their phones capturing every fake candid moment of her maternal pride. My parents hovered nearby, basking in the reflected glory of their grandson's achievement, while simultaneously monitoring Olivia's performance. Jake found me first, breaking away from a group of his fellow graduates. His face was flushed with excitement, his new wings gleaming on his chest. "We did it, Aunt Brooklyn," he said, squeezing my hands. "I couldn't have done it without you." "This is all you, Jake," I assured him. "I'm so proud of the man you've become." He glanced over his shoulder at the gathering crowd, then back at me. "Is tonight the night?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "It is. Are you sure you're okay with this? It might get ugly." "I told you before. I've got your back." His expression grew serious. "They need to understand what they've done, who you really are." A server approached with a tray of champagne flutes. Jake took two, handing one to me. "For courage," he said with a wink. I took a small sip, feeling the bubbles dance on my tongue. "I think it's time." With a subtle signal to the technician I'd hired, the lights in the ballroom dimmed slightly, and the projector screen illuminated. The first image appeared, a photograph of me at my studio, working on an intricate piece, my face a study in concentration. Conversations around the room gradually quieted as people noticed the display. Olivia turned, her expression shifting from annoyance at the interrupted attention to confusion as she recognized me in the image. I stepped forward, moving to stand beside the screen. I didn't need a microphone. The room had fallen silent enough that my clear voice carried easily. "For those who don't know me, I'm Brooklyn Mitchell, sister to Olivia, aunt to Jake." I gestured to the image behind me. "And this is what I do. I create, I build. I run a business that many of you have been led to believe is just a hobby, a pastime, a cute little distraction from my failure to achieve real success." The screen changed, showing the storefront of my Seattle studio, then interior shots of the workshop where my employees crafted pieces under my direction. Coastal Creations LLC employs 7 skilled artisans. Our pieces are carried in 23 high-end boutiques across the country. We have a 6-month waiting list for custom commissions. More images appeared, magazine features about my work, celebrity clients wearing my designs on red carpets, the patent documents for my clasp design. What most of you don't know, what my own family has never bothered to learn, is that I am a success, by any objective measure. I glanced at my parents, who were watching with expressions of bewilderment. My father's brow was furrowed as though trying to solve a particularly challenging equation. My mother's hand was pressed to her throat, her eyes wide. 2 months ago, at Olivia and Mark's anniversary celebration, I was publicly humiliated. I was called a leech, a burden on my family. I was told that my grandmother's bequest to me, money specifically left to further my business, had been redirected to a more worthy cause. The screen changed again, showing the relevant section of my grandmother's will, the passage highlighted for all to see. This was not a family decision. This was theft, plain and simple. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cousin Emma, standing near the bar, looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. But that was just the latest in a pattern that has defined my relationship with my sister and, by extension, my parents for years. Now the screen displayed a series of text messages. Olivia asking for the $15,000 loan, promising repayment, then later dismissing my request for the money. Bank statements showing the transfer, credit card statements showing her unauthorized purchases. I have been treated as less than for as long as I can remember, my achievements dismissed, my successes ignored, my generosity exploited. I turned to face Olivia directly. She stood frozen, her face drained of color, Mark's hand gripping her elbow. "I was the one you all mocked, but here's the truth you never wanted to see. I am successful. I am accomplished. I have built something meaningful and lasting, and I did it without your support, without your belief, without your respect." The screen changed again, displaying the valuation of my business, my investments, my net worth. The numbers spoke for themselves. I am not here for revenge. I am here for recognition, for acknowledgement of who I am and what I've achieved, and yes, for the return of what is rightfully mine. My mother stepped forward, her face pale. "Brooklyn, please, let's discuss this privately. This is a family matter." It stopped being private when Olivia humiliated me in front of 150 people. I replied evenly. It stopped being a family matter when my family failed to act like family. This is all fabricated. Olivia suddenly found her voice, high and strained. You're ruining my son's graduation with your jealousy and lies. Is it fabricated, Olivia? I asked calmly. Are these not your text messages? Your signatures? Your own words coming back to haunt you? You've always been jealous of me, she accused, her composure cracking. Always trying to steal my spotlight with your pathetic claims of success. I was about to respond when movement near the door caught my attention. Jake was striding across the room, his uniform crisp, his face set in determined lines. He walked directly to where I stood, turned to face the crowd, and snapped a perfect salute. Thank you, Aunt Brooklyn, he said, his voice clear and strong. You've always been my hero, the only one who saw me for who I am, not who others wanted me to be, the only one who supported my dreams without condition. He turned to face his mother, his salute dropping. I've known about the inheritance for weeks. I tried to get them to tell you the truth, to make it right. They refused. Olivia's face crumpled. Jake, you don't understand. Everything we've done has been for you. No, he said firmly. Everything you've done has been for yourselves, for appearances, for your own egos. Aunt Brooklyn is the only one who ever put me first. The silence that followed was profound. My father stood with his mouth slightly open, as though words had failed him completely. Mark stared at his son as if seeing a stranger. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a cocktail napkin. And Olivia looked shattered. The carefully constructed facade of her perfect life was crumbling before her eyes, in front of the very audience she'd cultivated so carefully. From the back of the room, a slow clap began. My Aunt Margaret, my father's sister, and always something of an outsider in family gatherings, stepped forward. I knew something was off, she announced, looking around the room. I've watched for years as Brooklyn was dismissed and belittled. I said nothing, and for that, I'm ashamed. She turned to me. Brooklyn, I'm proud of you, not just for your success, but for finally standing up for yourself. The mood in the room shifted palpably. People who had been averting their eyes now looked at me with something approaching respect. Several of Olivia's influencer friends quietly pocketed their phones. The live streams abruptly ended. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I'm not asking for sympathy or even understanding, I told the gathered crowd. I'm simply stating facts that should have been acknowledged long ago. I am Brooklyn Mitchell. I am successful. I am worthy of respect. And I will no longer accept anything less. With that, I gathered my custom clutch and walked toward the exit. Jake fell into step beside me, his presence a tangible support. As we reached the door, I turned back for one final look. My family stood frozen in the center of the room, islands in a sea of whispers and sideways glances. In that moment, I felt something unexpected, not triumph or vindication, but a kind of melancholy release. The anger I'd carried for so long was draining away, leaving behind a quiet certainty that I had done what was necessary. What now? Jake asked as we stepped into the hotel corridor. Now, I said, taking a deep breath. We go have dinner, just us, and we celebrate your achievement properly. Jake grinned, the tension leaving his shoulders. I'd like that. As we walked toward the elevators, my phone began buzzing with incoming messages. I switched it to silent without checking the screen. Whatever fallout was coming, it could wait until tomorrow. Tonight was for Jake, for celebration, for the simple pleasure of being with someone who saw me clearly and valued me for exactly who I was. The aftermath of what came to be known in family circles as the Belmont incident was swift and far-reaching. By the next morning, Olivia had lost nearly 150,000 Instagram followers, many of whom had witnessed her humiliation via the hastily ended live streams. Several brand partnerships were quietly terminated as companies distanced themselves from the brewing scandal. Mark, ever conscious of appearances, began damage control immediately. He contacted Jonathan Whitfield the very next day, offering to settle all financial claims privately. The $25,000 inheritance was transferred to my account within 48 hours, along with interest. The unpaid loan and unauthorized credit card charges were repaid by the end of the week. What surprised me most was the reaction from my parents. Instead of closing ranks around Olivia as they had always done, they seemed to fracture. My father called me 3 days after the graduation. His voice strained and unfamiliar. "I didn't know," he said without preamble. "About the inheritance, about the loan. I didn't know. Brooklyn." "How could you not know?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. "You're the accountant in the family. You've always managed the finances." "Mark took over when he married Olivia," he admitted. "He said it made sense since he works in finance. I trusted him. I trusted them both." The realization that my father had been manipulated as well came as a shock. He had always seemed so firmly in Olivia's corner that I'd assumed he was fully complicit in her actions. "I'm not asking you to choose sides, Dad," I told him. "I just wanted the truth to be known." "The truth," he repeated heavily. "The truth is that I failed you, Brooklyn. I was so focused on helping Olivia because she seemed to need it more. You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. I mistook your strength for not needing support." It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. My mother was a different story. She called me in tears, alternating between berating me for publicly humiliating my sister and pleading with me to forgive and forget. "Families don't do this to each other," she insisted. "We don't air our dirty laundry in public." "Families don't steal from each other either," I countered. "Families don't consistently devalue and dismiss one member to elevate another." "You've always been so dramatic," she sighed, falling back on a familiar refrain. "So sensitive about everything." "That's exactly what I'm talking about. Mom, even now, you're dismissing my feelings, my experiences. That's why we're here." The conversation ended in stalemate, with neither of us willing to give ground. I wasn't surprised when, on November 1st, 2023, I received a terse email from my father informing me that he and my mother were separating. The strain of recent events had apparently cracked the foundation of their 40-year marriage, revealing fault lines that had likely been there all along. Olivia and I didn't speak for 3 months. Then, in January, she showed up at my Seattle studio unannounced. She looked different, subdued, less polished. The designer clothes and perfect makeup had been replaced by jeans and a simple sweater, her face bare except for a touch of mascara. "Can we talk?" she asked, hovering in the doorway of my office. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sure." She sat, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "I've been doing a lot of thinking and therapy. Actually, Mark insisted, after everything." I waited, offering neither encouragement nor discouragement. "I've been awful to you," she said finally, meeting my eyes directly. "For years, decades, really, and I need to understand why." Of all the things I expected her to say, this wasn't on the list. Why what? Why I felt such a need to tear you down, to prove I was better than you, to make everyone see me as the successful one, even when it wasn't true. I leaned back in my chair, studying my sister's face. There was something different there, a vulnerability I hadn't seen since we were children. "And? Have you figured it out?" She smiled sadly. "I've always been jealous of you, Brooklyn, always. You know exactly who you are and what you want. You built something real, something meaningful. I've been chasing approval my whole life, trying to be what everyone wanted me to be. I never had your certainty, your authenticity." "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said quietly. No, it doesn't," she agreed. "Nothing excuses it. I want you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry, truly sorry." I didn't know what to say. The apology seemed genuine, but after years of manipulation, I was wary of taking anything at face value. "What do you want from me, Olivia?" "Nothing," she said, shaking her head. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just needed to say it to your face. You deserved that much. As she stood to leave, I noticed a small Help Wanted badge pinned to her purse. Are you working somewhere? She glanced down, a flush creeping into her cheeks. Yeah, at Nordstrom, in the jewelry department. Actually, the influencer gigs dried up after, and Mark and I are having some financial issues. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Olivia, who had mocked my jewelry career for years, now working in a jewelry department, I felt an unexpected twinge of empathy. Are you okay? Financially, we'll be fine, she said, straightening her shoulders. Mark's firm really is restructuring, but he'll land on his feet, and it's good for me, honestly, to work a real job, to earn my own money. She paused at the door. Jake's doing great. By the way, he asks about you all the time. We talk every week, I told her. He's an amazing young man. Yes, she agreed softly. He is. You saw that before any of us. After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, turning our conversation over in my mind. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible or even desirable. Too much water under the bridge, too many years of hurt. But the acknowledgement, the simple recognition of what had happened and why, felt like the closing of a chapter. In the months that followed, I focused on expanding coastal creations nationally. The publicity from the Belmont incident had an unexpected benefit. Several high-profile clients sought me out specifically because they'd heard about my story. A feature in a major business magazine highlighted female entrepreneurs who had overcome significant obstacles. Orders flooded in faster than we could fulfill them. I moved from my condo to a penthouse in Seattle's Queen Anne district, with panoramic views of Puget Sound and enough space for a home studio where I could work on special projects. I hired 3 more artisans and a business manager to handle the day-to-day operations, giving me more time to focus on design and creative direction. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. My father and I established a cautious new dynamic, not close, exactly, but respectful. He made genuine efforts to understand my business, occasionally asking thoughtful questions about production methods or market strategies. My mother and I settled into a pattern of periodic, carefully neutral phone calls, avoiding any topics that might lead to conflict. Olivia and Mark eventually divorced, another casualty of the fallout from that night in Chicago. She moved into a modest apartment and continued working at Nordstrom, gradually building a new life that seemed more authentic than the carefully curated image she'd maintained for so long. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for with family. Jake graduated from the Air Force Academy with honors and began his career as a military pilot. We remained close, our bond perhaps stronger for having weathered the family storm together. He visited Seattle whenever he had leave, spending hours in my studio just as he had as a child, now offering insights and suggestions that often proved surprisingly valuable. As for me, I discovered something unexpected in the aftermath of standing up for myself. A sense of peace I hadn't known was missing. The constant need to prove my worth, to justify my choices, had dissipated. I knew who I was. I knew what I had built. And finally, so did everyone else. In April 2024, I attended a business conference in Vancouver as a featured speaker. My topic, Authentic Creation, Building a Brand with Integrity, drew a standing room-only crowd. After my presentation, a tall man with thoughtful eyes and an easy smile approached me. That was inspiring, he said, extending his hand. James Carter, I'm with Horizon Ventures. Brooklyn Mitchell, I replied, shaking his hand. And thank you. I know who you are, he smiled. Your reputation precedes you, both as a designer and as someone who doesn't take any nonsense. I laughed, surprised by his directness. Is that my reputation? Among other things. He nodded. All good, I assure you. Would you be interested in getting coffee sometime? I have some thoughts about potential expansion opportunities for coastal creations that might interest you. 6 months later, James and I were not just business associates, but partners in a more personal sense. He was unlike anyone I'd dated before. Supportive without being suffocating, interested in my work without trying to manage it, confident enough in his own success that he felt no need to diminish mine. "You know what I admire most about you?" he asked one evening as we sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sound in shades of gold and purple. "You built yourself. No one handed you anything. No one cleared the path. You just kept moving forward, one step at a time, until you created exactly the life you wanted." I considered his words, thinking about the long, often painful journey that had brought me to this moment. "Not exactly," I corrected him gently. "I'm still building. I think maybe we always are." James raised his glass in a toast. To building, then, and to having the courage to tear down what doesn't serve us anymore. I clinked my glass against his, feeling the truth of his words resonate within me. I had learned the hardest lessons from my family, about worth, about recognition, about standing up for myself, but I had built my own future on my terms. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all.